Nice, very nice to see you. And I mean, it's such a great opportunity to know each other, to enlarge our community, to have this place to know each other. Yep. So, thank you for joining.
Absolutely, yeah. It's great to see people so interested in all the Wakian stuff. It's
And,
fantastic. It's fantastic reaching out to people like this. It's great.
and just to let everybody know, just in case you didn't know, we're live streaming right now on YouTube, so it just kicked in. So if that's okay with everybody, that just got going.
Basis.
Awesome, so great to see so many new people. This is awesome. So we're gonna have more people joining us, but we'll just let them come in as it goes. And I figure since most people here weren't here last year, I'll give you the quick previously on maybe night, and then we can skip all that stuff and we can head right into the new conversation. So basically, what maybe night is the Finnegans Wake equivalent of Bloomsday. That's the idea in short, is to create a day to celebrate Finnegans Wake, just like we already have one to celebrate Ulysses. The tricky part with Finnegans Wake is what day, because it's not quite like Ulysses where it is very, very specific. So you kind of have to maybe fudge it a little bit to come up with a specific day for Finnegans Wake. So years ago, I got really, really into the skeleton key to Finnegans Wake. Like I almost like that as much as Finnegans Wake itself, because I really like Joseph Campbell. And so they claim in that book that Finnegans Wake takes place on the winter solstice. When I look at the text that they're pulling that from, I don't see it. I don't see where they're getting that from. But it's a arbitrary starting point for something like this. You go, all right, because it does make sense. It's the longest night. If you're going to set a book in dreams, setting it on the longest night is not the worst option that you could pick. But again, I don't see it in the text. Also, they claim in that passage that the dreamer wakes up from the dream. And I don't know that I see that happening in the book. It feels like the book stays within the dream the whole time. So again, it's up for debate whether that's a legitimate interpretation, but it's just the starting point for this. I know there, John Gordon, a Joyce scholar, he has a competing theory, which oddly enough, his is the spring equinox, specifically of 1938, which is Nora's birthday, which again makes sense. But then I kind of think that, so you have Finnegans Wake that goes around in a circle, and you have our calendar that goes around in a circle. So really, it's probably both. It probably goes around in a circle. But essentially, it's an arbitrary distinction. I don't think Finnegans Wake necessarily takes place on a specific day. It's just an excuse for us to get together and talk about it. Though I will say that was very interesting. So last year we did the first maybe night thing. And then just last week, a group of Joyceans in Dublin got together and they created Gloomsday. So Gloomsday, the first ever one held, was on December 15th, just last week. So and it's the idea with Gloomsday is it's the furthest date away from Bloomsday. So we're actually close to, we're kind of in some sort of zone that multiple people have discovered. So whether it should be December 15th, whether it should be the spring equinox, or whether it should be today, that's kind of how we arrived at this event. So yeah, so I turn it over to whoever wants to introduce themselves and let us know how you got into this world.
Well, I don't mind going. I'm Richard Hart. I'm in Toronto. Hi from Toronto. It's very cold here, like -11 today. So as a gloom day, it's pretty good. I got into this world a long time ago. As far as Joyce is connected, I got to Toronto in 2000 and immediately hooked up with the Bloomsday Toronto Festival, and I've been with them now for since then. But I'd never gotten into the wake. and then as a pandemic project, my friend Adam Seelig, who should be around here somewhere, joined a Finnegans Wake reading group online that a couple of friends of his were trying to make headway, and they couldn't. They enjoyed what they were doing, but they couldn't really get into it. So he knew that I read Joyce. So we started doing readings there, and then it quickly became a thing when we decided, oh well, we'll do something what we didn't know, but it turned into a film project. So now we're filming chapter by chapter Finnegans Wake, staged as live readings in front of an audience. And then we have a crew, we have about a few cameras, and then we cut them. The first film has gone out now and is up and available on YouTube. It has appeared in some festivals. We've shot another 6 chapters, and we're rehearsing the 7th. And that's what we spend our time doing. So I think I've certainly sent information about it's through One Little Goat. One Little Goat is the company that's making it, and I think Alexander has information about that I think can be posted through the chat or on Maybe Night's website, whatever. But that's what we're up to.
Yeah, I will absolutely add that to the website. That sounds fantastic. That's really cool. Yeah, I got it written down. As soon as we're done here, I'll check it out and I'll pop it up.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else that wants to pop in, feel free.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thanks. I'll jump in. I'm also calling in from Toronto. My name's Toby Malone, and I am an old colleague of Richard's, so we go way back. So we collided accidentally on the Wake, but we first met years ago on Shakespeare. But my background is that I'm a former dramaturg, theatre artist, now librarian, and I am very much an amateur Joycean. And I had decided some time ago that I needed to finish reading the works of Joyce, and I'd read all the rest, but I hadn't read The Wake, and I'd tried silently tried reading it to myself, having had trouble with that. And so decided to keep myself accountable by setting up a podcast and reading it out loud with no preparation, just to read it. So Richard's is very well prepared and very comprehensive and brilliant. And I actually was able to attend one of the readings of Richard's. I can't recommend Richard's highly enough. And my podcast is called Wake, just called Wake. And so I host it with my colleague, TJ Young, who couldn't be here today, who sends his regards. And so the idea was literally we had neither of us had read The Wake. So we decided we were going to read it out loud just to see if we could. And the podcast kept us accountable. And so we started doing that. We recorded 1 or 2 episodes and released them. And then we realized people were listening, which was kind of crazy to us. So we're coming in on 3,000 listens to our podcast over the last 6 months, which is crazy. We got listeners all over the world, and so we're currently just getting to the end of book 3. We're going very fast, and so we're doing this. Usually, we will release an episode every week. Usually, we read about 15 to 20 pages at a time, and we'll discuss what we've discovered. And so we started out just the 2 of us, and then we started bringing on guests. And we have guests come in and read it. Some of my former students have read with us. My children have read on the podcast. My parents have read on the podcast. Richard came and joined us to talk about his take on the Wake. And then we had participants from Bloomsday in Dublin come and join us. We had songwriters from Scotland. There's all sorts of people who've joined us on Wake. So we're going to be finished the podcast in late January. We'll have finished reading the book, and then that's the end. It's a sort of a limited series. But I was delighted to get an opportunity to join everyone here today, because this has been a really formative process for us. And while we're not exactly wringing great meaning out of the book, we're certainly having fun as we read. So it's been terrific, and we're Yeah, big fans of of what's happening here.
Yeah, that is awesome. I listened to the first episode, and this is something to discuss later. But it makes me think, and it should have occurred to me sooner that Finnegan's Wake might be liturgical. It might be meant to be read out loud, and that some of the difficulty of it, you get more fun out of it by maybe going with reading it out loud and what it sounds like, as opposed to the text where you got to be like, what does this mean? But the
Absolutely.
sound might just make it a little bit more fun.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that was our central premise for going with not only an out loud thing, but an audience involved as
Right.
well. Like Joyce said, if you have trouble understanding Finnegan's Wake, all you need to do is read it aloud, and then we interpreted that to mean hearers as well. So we like an audience was part of that. So not doing an audio book, but doing a live reading and then just filming that was part of our
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense because
Yeah.
it becomes completely accessible at that point. Once it's just a thing that you hear and you're hearing silly sounds and you're picking out some fragments, and then all of a sudden you're in, then it's not that brick wall that you're hitting with that text.
Well,
That's awesome.
and for our listeners, listeners and our readers both have expressed appreciation that we've been able to unshackle them from the sense that they need to understand everything and they need to look for meaning, and they can just enjoy the words. And
Yeah.
so that's been wonderful. Yeah.
That's awesome. Lorenzo, do you want to hop in?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Lorenzo from Turin, Italy. I've always been fascinated by Joyce and the Wake. It was a bit over my head though for some years, so I just kept like collecting informations about it and trying to understand what it was. I read parts of it, but I didn't really have a key. I was very interested in trying to understand why the structure is like that, if it's all a dream, if it's partially a dream, if it relates to Ulysses and the other books. And then some years ago, like 5 years ago or something like that, I came up with some ideas and let's say like a theory, a working theory about Finnegans Wake. Then I started really studying it to see if there was something to my theories. And then during the pandemics, the chance of getting into online reading groups became a thing, and so I promptly did. I am part of the Zurich group, and that's probably the only way, at least for me at the moment, to read it when we are a group of people and we all think together. We kind of manage to crack it, or at least partially. And yeah, that's it.
That is beautiful. And my theory is, if you have a theory about Finnegan's Wake and then go looking in Finnegan's Wake to see if you're correct, the answer will be yes. I think there's enough in there that the answer will always be yes. All right. Anybody?
How affirming.
Yeah. Whoever wants to go next.
Okay. I'll go next. My name's Raphael, or Rafi for short. I'm probably better known through my website called Fuit. Anybody not familiar with Fuit? Do I need to present it? No. Okay. So I first read Finnegans Wake in 1983, and I've been working on it since the 1990, privately mostly. At that point, it was just a set of files on my computer. But in 2005, I basically released what I had as Fleet, and since then I've been building and maintaining it fairly regularly, now more than 19 years. I'm now retired, so I can spend, when we're not traveling, we travel a lot, my wife and I. When we're not traveling, I probably spend something like 40, 50 hours a week working on Finnegans Wake / Fleet. And it's regularly updated. Perhaps it's relevant for later, but uh, what you mentioned about reading Finnegans Wake, either um, in your podcast or in your films, I wondered if you were familiar with the work of Simon Lockley.
Hmm.
He was he had a radio show on WBAI New York for many, many years. I think it was a weekly show. And once a year, it did a reading of Finnegans Wake. It was the last show of the year, usually before or just after Christmas. And he'd read a portion of Finnegans Wake for the entire show, which was, I don't know, an hour and a half or so. And he dubbed it the slowest online reading ever because he started in the 1990s and it ended in 2016 when he died. He wasn't able to finish it.
Oh, I see.
So from the 1990s till I think the last one was 2014, which was half of 3-2, something. That's the point he reached. If you're interested, I have the extant recording. Not everything survived, but what did survive, which is mostly from the 2001 to 2014, is archived on Fleet on the readings page, so it might interest you as
That's
something
fantastic. Yeah.
historical.
I don't know Simon Lockley, Raphael, but I certainly know Fleet. We go to that all the time. It forms one of the several things that we regularly mine for meaning for us. But Fleet is absolutely one of the key resources for us. And I see my colleague Adam Seelig has joined us. He's the director of our film series.
Yeah, I know Adam.
And what's awesome about Fweep is like beyond just like how much is there is like that it is still there, because I went through all my links from when I first started reading Finnegans Wake, all my resources, and it's really just down to Fweep from my original batch of resources. The original batch of tools have all kind of gone away, and it made me realize like, oh, this stuff has to be preserved. If it's not preserved, it goes away. So all that work you're putting into it is one, amazing, and two, very much appreciated.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Linda, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. Before I introduce our group, because there are several people here from our reading group, I would like to say something directly to Raphael. Obviously, thank you for Fleet. And I listened to your interview with Jerry Felk just the other day, and I just want to give some feedback on that, because you said that it really took off when you went to Trieste Joyce School and you met some people. You understood that this is something that people might need. So I went to Trieste Summer School, Joyce School last summer, and there was a paper, annotations to Finnegans Wake. And it was one of the best papers. One of the presenters spoke about McHugh and Fleet. So you are now the object of academic research. Well done.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great paper. Right, yes. And of course, our group called Wake in Progress, and it's a Ukrainian Finnegans Wake reading group. We've been doing it for a year. We started on the 22nd of December last year. And we've covered 60 pages, a little bit more than 60 pages by now, which makes us a relatively fast-moving group.
Very.
Yeah, that's because we do things a little bit differently. We've been trying to reach out to other reading groups, to reading group and other groups, so I can compare, so I know we are a little bit different. But if you want to see what we do differently, we've recorded one of our sessions, and I think Bobby will put up a link on the website so you can watch how Ukrainians do it. And so today we've got Igor from, we are Ukrainians, but we're scattered around the world. So I'm joining now from Kiev. And unfortunately, as it happens almost every day, there's a drone attack. So if it gets brutal, I will have to move to a safer place. But we've got Alexander, who's in Paris, and Igor, who's in San Francisco. And one of the things that we've discovered is very helpful. We meet on Zoom once in 2 weeks, and we've discovered the joy of recap, like previously on Finnegans Wake. And we've also discovered that Igor has the superpower of summarizing. And hopefully he can summarize in his wonderful style things that we have read. So we are somewhere in the middle, maybe closer to the end of chapter 3, part 1. Okay, so over to Igor.
Hi, everyone. I'd just first like to say I have this sensation now, like I've for the first time came to visit the Royal Geographic Society, and there are all these like polar explorers sitting by the fire and smoking pipes, and I'm just like wandering around, and there's all these like celebrities and Joyce celebrities. So it is a thrill to be here, and Richard, love the videos and the recordings. Those are fantastic. And yes, so summarizing Finnegans Wake is not even a Sisyphean task, because at least Sisyphus like is able to push the rock up the hill a little bit and like make some progress before it rolls back down. This is just completely I don't want to say pointless, because there's obviously a point to it, but it is a futile but fun effort. And so yes, we're 60 pages in. We're just came across the phrase "to be continued," so we know it's going to continue. And my sense of it, at least, is that we've entered this giant house. We came by different doors, like Alexander came through the Robert Anton Wilson door. We met in a room in this house, and now we're exploring. We've walked past a bunch of locked rooms, and in some of them people are singing, some of them people are drinking, and some of them people are making love. And in one of the rooms, there's a trial going on, and somebody's on trial for something. We're not sure who's on trial and what they're on trial for. We kind of hear these echoes. We hear the defendants, we hear the accusers. Out of the windows, we hear kind of the general population expressing their opinions on the trial, but that's all we can tell so far. We think we might be going in circles in this house because things are starting to look a little bit familiar. There are portraits on the walls that are starting to look familiar. There are maps that are looking a little familiar. There are lots of books on the walls. We can't read any of them because they're in Romanian or something, but at least the covers look familiar. And then people who came before us have very helpfully left little notes for us. And so we're using these notes to try to navigate. We try to make sense of the house in different ways. So Linda draws these amazing mind maps. People try to make sense by singing the songs that are being mentioned, by traveling to Joyce places, by baking Joyce-themed pastries.
Ooh.
So however, through whatever channel you can ingest Joyce, we're trying to do it. And we also do the reading out loud. It's not scary like The Shining. It's occasionally scary, but that's the hardest part, I think, to explain to people outside of this, is like, this is actually a fun process. Like, there's lots of fun at Finnegans Wake, and we are excited to come across the to be continued, and we do we do look forward to continuing and figuring out what this trial is all about. Is he guilty? Are we guilty? So thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, real quick, I've joined the Ukrainian the Wake in Progress group twice, and it's been an absolute blast, and has just like turned over stones buried in the sediment of Finnegans Wake for me, where like just all of a sudden I see it in a new way. And it's just it's that group effort where you're kind of seeing it from multiple different perspectives, and it just trigger something in you. And then I highly recommend joining them for a session. I've gotten a lot out of it. Alexander, do you want to hop in as well?
I just would like to add a couple of words that first of all, yeah, we are very eager to see guests at ours, because usually we discuss everything in Ukrainian. We read in English in Joycean, how to say. Yeah, but yeah. But we are very eager to have guests, and we switch to English when we have guests, and usually maybe each fifth, sixth reading is with someone, and it's very nice that last time or the previous, I guess the last time we had Ketsi from Germany with us, and her summary was so nice, like as Igor just said, and I'm sure that as all of you can add that finally she understood how reading of Finnegans Wake can be a fun. Yeah, so exactly, we are here for fun. It's such a great pleasure to share these emotions, and I would like to add just maybe one thing for now, that Bobby, I'm very grateful for your initiative with Maybe Night, because it is clear for me that there are no like people who read Finnegans Wake by coincidence. Like we have something mutual, and it's so important to have this how to say, common space to feel this community, to share the ideas, to share some artifacts, to know that it's not like me and a couple of guys reading, but there are lots of guys all over the world. You can join any community for reading, for discussing. When you are in business trip, you can join and just drink a tea with someone. It means a lot, and yeah. Thanks to your amazing initiative, we are here. And maybe last thing, which is important just to say for me, why I appreciate your contribution so much, because I was sure I knew about Joyce, not about Joyce, about Finnegans Wake in 2009 or 2010. Because I was and am a great fan of Robert Anton Wilson, and Wilson wrote a lot about. I didn't remember the author name, but Finnegans Wake was the name, and I decided, okay, as Wilson recommends to read this book, I need to spend a week to read quickly and then to move forward. It was very nice. It was very nice to understand that it doesn't work like this. Yep, but it's so interesting how many people, as Igor already shared, that each one has his role in his own gates to Finnegans Wake. For me, Joyce, I didn't know who is Joyce. I knew that it was some guy which was recommended by Wilson. But each story is so different, and it's so interesting to know these stories, to share them, and to feel this like collaboration. Yeah. So yeah, once again, guys, I appreciate very much your time, your contributions. It's so interesting to know more about you and Finnegans Wake, and you in the context of Finnegans Wake and Joyce. And yep, let's have a fun.
And Alexander, I mean, the credit for this all goes to you, though. Like getting everybody together for this was 100% almost all Alexander. I just applauded on the sidelines for getting people together for this. So I really appreciate all all the networking and reach out that you did. It was clearly it worked wonders. And you bring up an interesting point, and this may be good context for some of the people joining us this year that weren't here last year. So a lot of us here did arrive at Joyce through a door opened by author Robert Anton Wilson. Literally, it was just assigned to me as a class project. So I would not have read Finnegans Wake unless Mr. Wilson was like, read Finnegans Wake. And so Eric and Oz have been with me 20 years now, studying Finnegans Wake. We were all with Robert Anton Wilson. He ran online workshops at a place called the Maybe Logic Academy. Once he got a little bit older and his post-polio prevented him from traveling. And so we all studied Finnegans Wake with him. So we kind of have a particular gloss on it, I think. And an interesting gloss if you arrive at Joyce kind of through the more scholarly doors, you made my entree into Joyce is when I was younger, I ate psychedelic mushrooms. And then I read Joyce and was like, oh, I get it. So it's kind of seeing it through that kind of like hyperspatial perspective, which is a little bit different than maybe what they're doing at the James Joyce Center. So Eric, Oz, and Peter may be the only person that met Robert Anton Wilson through Joyce instead of the other way around. I think it's always the other way around. But I think Peter found Robert Anton Wilson through Joyce. And so, guys, whoever wants to hop in next, and then we can dive into general discussion.
I could jump in. Hi, guys. I'm happy to be here with you all. Thanks for putting this together. I first want to say, Rafi, thanks for everything you do, because I live on your website and I have for many years. So thank you very much. So yeah, my name is Peter Quadrino. I have been organizing a Finnegans Wake group out of Austin for the past 12 years. I've been reading Finnegans Wake for probably about that long as well. And I write a blog. It's just called Finnegans, Wake ! There's all kinds of different reflections and thoughts and stuff that comes from the reading group and all the discussions I tend to document there. So I submitted a thing for this that's about Walt Whitman and Joyce. I've been interested in Walt Whitman a lot in the past year or so. I read Leaves of Grass, and I just found so many resonances with the Wake especially. I've been involved in all kinds of Wake things. It's one of my biggest obsessions for a very long time. I've been to a lot of Joyce conferences. I presented at Joyce conferences. I got to host some reading groups at Joyce conferences. I did a recording of a Wake chapter for the Waywords and Mean Signs thing years ago, which is pretty fun. And I'm very excited to check out all the material that Bobby posted on the website. I've been looking at it this morning. It's really interesting. And happy to have this discussion with you all.
And Eric, I'm going to insist that you plug your upcoming book, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Man.
Eric, you're muted. Sorry.
My cell phone camera's messed up. My laptop speakers don't work. It makes me think of J.G. Ballard's obsession with technology that doesn't work, which in some ways sounds very Wakean. Bless you, Bobby. Bless all of you from around the world. This is so cool. So I had Finnegans Wake groups for about 36 years. Starting in I first started reading Bob Wilson in 82. Started reading the Wake in 83. In Prometheus Rising, he mentioned having a group. So I said, hey, let's make it like a Bible study. A big book. I don't understand reading it. So it's 85 to 2001. I did that. So I got this book coming out called Straight Out of Dublin. The dear blessed Richard Rossa has had such patience with me. it would not surprise me to see a book out in March. Who knows? I don't know. And so part of me feels like that guy in Moby Dick who warns Ishmael not to get on the Pequod, but I think everybody here is already aboard, and so we're stuck for at least the next 3 years. I hear silence.
Yeah, I was gonna. If you got something else, Oz, if you want to hop in.
Sure. My name's Oz Fritz, and I feel truly humbled to be in this august presence of Joycean enthusiasts. I've never been part of a Finnegans Wake group. I'm just an enthusiast. I came into it through the Robert Anton Wilson door. First, trying to read Ulysses. That's because he was a big fan of Ulysses, and I started it a few times, and I would get through it, but it didn't really click to me for a long time. Wilson introduced me, among a few other people also, to a guy named E.J. Gold. And E.J. Gold is the son of a famous science fiction editor. And he has he has an esoteric school up in Northern California that I became part of. And there was one time where Gold was making everybody write short stories, and he was making the point that titles cannot be copyrighted. And he started talking about Finnegans Wake during this, and something he said made me want to read Finnegans Wake. And right around that time, my father died. He was only 58, so it was a little bit unexpected. So I had this kind of strong emotional thing going on. And the story I wrote for my father, I titled Finnegans Wake, because obviously Finnegans Wake is about someone who's just died, or, that's in the title anyway. So anyway, and then I read Finnegans Wake in its totality, understanding very little of it, but noticing that when I read it, that I would start to feel mildly high, like a meditative high. And so I just kept going through it like that, because even though I didn't know what was going on most of the time, it felt like my consciousness was somehow improving. And then Wilson, the Maybe Logic Academy started up around, I don't know, I think it was 2004 or 5. I joined because the first class I heard about was with Aleister Crowley, and then I stayed on the academy. And one of the later classes was called Tales of the Tribe, which was a study of Joyce, mostly Finnegans Wake, along with Ezra Pound. And somehow becoming part of that, these things have a very strong impact on me. So this is sort of my group work with the book, but I somehow started understanding Finnegans Wake more. Like I could read it and it was starting to make sense, whereas before it wasn't making hardly any sense at all. And somehow from that course, I read Finnegans Wake again for the second time, and it, although I still didn't understand most of it, I got a lot out of it. And then recently, in the last couple of years, I got back into Ulysses, and I finally feel like I got it. Not that I understand all of it, but I could sort of see the sort of genius of Joyce work there. And I read Finnegans Wake again last year and took a lot of notes and stuff. And my contribution this time around was comparing Moby Dick with Finnegans Wake. And because I think they both novels were using a framework to try to put everything they could in their philosophy and their just life into these books. Melville was a little bit more, he had more of a framework with the hunt for the whale and stuff like that. But I think Joyce was influenced by Moby Dick in trying to do the same thing. And a couple of comments that came up before, reading aloud. Yeah, I think that's a real key to it, because I see I'm a sound engineer, a music producer and sound engineer, and I regard Joyce as a sound engineer. Like a lot of the words and stuff he makes and the way he puts things together, I don't know if they're meant to make intellectual sense, but more just for the rhythm of it, for the sound of it. And so when you hear it out loud, you can listen to it like you would listen to music. So if you're listening to any kind of music, whether there's words in it or not, Beethoven or whatever, you're not really trying to figure out what are they doing with that, what's going on in this piece of music, or what's the story behind it. You're just kind of taking it in, and it has an effect on you. It has an effect on your mood. And that's one of the great things about both music and about Finnegans Wake, is that you can come back to it, to the same piece, to a piece you really like, or to Finnegans Wake, and it's different every single time because you're picking up more to it, more than you did the previous time. And part of that is that your understanding grew last time, so the next time you're picking up a little bit more. And it's inexhaustible, in my opinion. And thank you all for having this.
Yeah, I was literally at some point I was going to be like, Oz, as a sound engineer, what do you like? I'm so glad that you got ahead of the game there. Adam, do you want to hop in and say hello before we get rolling? And then Brenton, also hello. Oh, Adam, I think you're still muted.
Maybe I'm here now. Okay.
Yep, there we go.
Oh, it's great to meet you all. Sweet, it's fantastic. I mean, when I signed on, Rafi was speaking, so it's kind of amazing to hear your voice. I'm also very sound oriented. Also, I've approached actually life through my ears. I don't take my eyes for granted, but the ears are terrific way to experience this. And of course, it's because of Richard. I wouldn't be reading this if it weren't for Richard. Maybe Richard already told our origin story there.
Yeah, I gave a brief praise for how it started in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I did do that. Yeah.
I don't know if people have read online another terrific resource we've started to turn to, in addition to McHugh and Fleet, is John Gordon's online blog. He is determined to fill in a lot of the gaps in McHugh. So he's really just extending McHugh's work as much as he can. That's been gold for us in certain cases where we are really scratching our heads. And I was just reading an author from Alberta. Maybe this is not showing up very well, but it's called Music at the Heart of Thinking. This is, I think Fred Waugh lives in Calgary now. He's originally from British Columbia, the province. I was born in Vancouver on the west coast of Canada. And I just love that phrase, music at the heart of thinking. So I do feel like we are reading something where the sound, musicality, extraordinary combinations of phonemes that we really won't hear anywhere else are awakening us. And I just want to read you this bit from Fred Waugh, if I may. To say I don't understand what this means is, at least, to recognize that this means. The problem is that meaning is not a totality of sameness and predictability. Within each word, each sentence, meaning has slipped a little out of sight, and all we have are traces, shadows, still warm ashes. The meaning available from language goes beyond the actual instance of this word, that word. A text is a place where a labyrinth of continually revealing meanings are available, a place that offers more possibility than we can be sure we know, sometimes more than we want to know. And then I'm going to skip ahead, and he says something terrific here. No single meaning is the right one because no right ones stand still long enough to get caught. So that's Fred Waugh, W-A-H. And I thought that was terrific way into understanding this book, Music at the Heart of Thinking. Really, really a pleasure to meet you all and to kind of share this moment together. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And then Brenton has a very important role to play for us today. I'll either let him say it. He may not remember what it is. So Brenton, you can just introduce yourself and I can fill in the gap if you don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, I think I'm here as the token person who doesn't know an awful lot about Joyce. Isn't that sort of why I'm here?
Yeah. You're our point of view character. You're outside the bubble. You can tell us, if we're, way out in nothingness.
I mean, I can say like sort of the connections that I've had to date, which is really I read Portrait of the Artist as a young man. I read Dubliners, and I enjoyed both of those. I read some background information about Joyce. I read a book, I think, perhaps it was called Finding Joyce, which was about the reception that he had in Ireland and the way that people sort of treated him and his work, and the censors and so on, and the public reception of his work over time. And at one point, I was going to use his work for my own purposes. Specifically, I think, I don't know if it was a Joycean term or somebody else coined it, this term, holographic prose. I don't know if that's maybe even a Robert Anton Wilson term, but about like the idea of it containing multiple vantage points. But that's the full extent of my understanding of Joyce. And apart from that, I'm a little bit of a leaf in the breeze. I do apologize for coming a little bit late.
Nah, just in time, so far as I can tell. All right, so I'd like to ask a question to the group that kind of pertains to some things that I don't know a lot about, and that I think many of you will know quite a bit about, and so I can kind of maybe learn something. Joyce is working from a perspective where he's going blind, right? His eyesight is failing. He's increasingly living in a world of sound exclusively, which is, he's already kind of biased towards that because he originally starts out as a singer, correct? I believe Nora even like not scolded, but was like, you know what? You probably would have been better off as a singer. So he has this musical talent there already. He's kind of forced to live in a world of sound as his vision fails, and yet he still insists on writing a like uncopy editable book in giant crayon, which is I enjoy that stubbornness. But anyway, so he's the visual component of the book, I would assume, is pretty low because he's living in a soundscape. And then the other thing, perspective he's working with that I can't relate to, that I think a lot of you can, is he can speak multiple languages. So he's like, his stream of consciousness is not limited to only English the way mine is. And I know we have a lot of people who are right now interacting with us in a second, third language. So what does Finnegans Wake look like to a person that speaks multiple languages? Do you relate to it on that level? Is that a characteristic of your own headspace, that it has these kind of different modalities? And then another offshoot question, and you can just pick and choose whatever you see here to respond to. Is Finnegans Wake in English? Does that count as English, or is this some other thing? And so I open it up. Whoever's got a response, I would love to hear it.
A couple things. I don't mean to barge in. I think Finnegans Wake is very visual. You know, I think that something like the footnote chapter, something like the Olivia chapter, Joyce is working on a lot of sensual levels, and just also that his peer group was very polylingual. Okay, and of course, some people suggest that he was annoyed with the fame that Eliot got for The Wasteland, that he thought Eliot was sort of appropriating some of his techniques. But people like Pound and Joyce also could function reasonably well in a lot of languages. So that was something that someone like William Carlos Williams faulted Eliot for. They said, we got to come back to where most people function in a much more monolingual way.
Okay, I guess we are multilingual. In our Ukrainian group, in Ukraine, practically everyone is bilingual. People speak Ukrainian and Russian, for example. For me, Russian is my mother tongue, but I'm speaking Ukrainian more and more on a daily basis. And I've been teaching English for I don't know how many years. So for me, it's the language that I have been in contact with a lot. And of course, everyone who comes to our group has a little bit different linguistic landscape, and we react to the text differently depending on it. For example, there is a difference between me and Alexander. Because Alexander once asked the question, here comes everybody, how does it translate into Ukrainian? And I couldn't translate it. And then I realized another thing, I don't need this translated. I do not translate it in my head in Ukrainian, for example, or Russian. I don't have to. But other people kind of need to translate it to understand it, and therefore their reaction and interaction with the text is different. And Igor has been living in the United States for many years. It's difficult for him to speak Ukrainian and our Ukrainian discussions, but he's doing it. So I guess his reaction will be different. And one thing that we've noticed, there are Slavic roots all around Finnegans Wake, and there are words that are distinctly Russian, for example. So it's harder for me to spot them immediately than it is for Alexander, because he's more tuned in with Slavic languages, and I probably a little bit less, and probably for Igor it's also harder. So we're more tuned into English. For us to recognize that it is a Slavic root, it's hard. And we had this case with tachanka, which was inside of a word, but tachanka is a pretty big word in itself, and I failed to see it. And the funniest thing is when Fuit tells you it's a Russian root, and I say, oh, gosh, right? Thanks, right? That's hilarious, but it happens, yeah.
Just to add one question here, one sentence here, that we recently we agreed when we have the sentences in how to say in Linda, what is this word? Parentheses.
Parentheses.
Yeah, parentheses. Thank you, guys. And we discussed that one who is reading, other joining, for example, French is on my side, Italian is on someone else's side, etc. So we make it a little bit like this multilingual approach, more visible, more audible.
Oops, I think my mic's on.
We introduce polyphony into our reading. And Lorenzo, for example, obviously his first language is Italian. I also asked him this question, here comes everybody. How do you translate it into Italian? And what he came up with in Italian, made sense, but in Slavic languages I'm familiar with, I could not find anything suitable, because here comes everybody. There's so much to this phrase. You can read it in so many different ways. And also it's HCE. Oh my God. I don't think this particular phrase, at least, is translatable into Slavic languages.
Yeah, I would like
Bobby,
to say that.
oh, go ahead, please. Sorry.
Okay, that since nobody, I think, really tackled that part of the question, that we cannot really say, in my opinion, that Finnegans Wake is written in English. I mean, it's a variation of English, like Wakees or Waken English. But there are, in my opinion, it's quite relevant, because it's very central and peculiar to the book, to the fact that there are different rules. I mean, rules of regular English grammar are systematically broken, while there are other rules, like if you make a compound, a portmanteau of two other words, that works, and that you are meant to understand, and so it's a different grammar than English. It's very disputable whether it's consistent, if there is a grammar or there isn't. But I think it's more interesting to think about the Wake as not written in regular English, and trying to get a better sense of what the grammar or the characteristics of this other kind of English are.
It may be a dangerous discussion because we already talked about how it's somewhat religious and liturgical, especially as we read it out loud. And, last time we argued about a religious text and whether it should be translated from like Latin, and have, there was a long war, and we don't want to cause a fracture in the Joyce community by attempting to translate the Wake into English and having the Protestant movement within the Joyce community.
I would love to have insight into the Japanese translation of the Wake, and how that is even like where you even begin. I mean, I guess with the ideograms, you can kind of maybe just literally combine them together in a way that is maybe more straightforward than I'm thinking. But that just taking it from one type of language into a complete other seems pretty interesting. I'd like to have the perspective of like how much it actually translates and how much it's just kind of like a representation.
I actually have a copy of the Japanese translation. I'm hoping to write something about it on my blog at some point. But what I typically do with it is I'll put Google Translate on my phone, where you could like put something on the camera and it'll try to translate it instantly. So I'll point that towards the Japanese translation and see what it comes up with, and it's really interesting. It's basically it seems to be like converting it into a kind of simpler poetry than what we see on the page. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's also cool to like try to get your bearings when you're flipping through the Japanese text by finding things that they wouldn't have translated into Japanese, so they just put as is. So like somewhere in, I think, chapter 3, maybe, there's a point where it's like it's kind of in the center of the page. It has several dots, and then like a question mark, and then several dots and an exclamation point. So they leave that as is. So it's like flipping around, you could find those kind of things and know like, okay, this is page 33 or whatever it is. So let me compare it. So yeah, at some point I want to try to translate it all back to English and compare it to the text.
That would be really cool.
Kenji Hayakawa, is he on the call, Richard? Did Kenji make it?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. Is he part of Des Gunning's group? I don't think he is. I'm not sure if I extended a thing to him.
Okay, because I just assumed he was going to be here, but Peter, we need to put you in touch with Kenji, who came to Richard's reading. He lives in Dublin, and he runs Finnegans Wake Reading Group in Japan. And lovely, smart, terrific guy. And when we started, Richard, we read chapter 6 in Dublin, right? In your hometown of Rush.
That's right, yeah.
And before we started, the first word, this is the quiz, the night quiz. And let's see here. The first word is so, S-O question mark. And Kenji pointed out immediately to us, well, so is yes in Japanese. That was how we started. So just immediately he's hearing so in a way that's different. Page 126. Yeah. So who do you know tonight, ladies and gentlemen? So Kenji would be a great person to talk to for that blog entry, and I'm sure he'd be game to chat with you. That'd be great. I'd love to hear what you guys come up with.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to chat with him. One other interesting thing about that I'll mention. So I've been to Japan a couple times in the last few years. I really love it there. And one little thing I noticed is on on the signs around town, or when you're like looking at a map, there's a Japanese character that means river, and it basically looks like 3 straight lines. So it's kind of like the river with the, you know, the banks. And it's interesting because in the wake, one of the numbers associated with Anna Livia is a 111. So it's, you know, again, it's the Japanese character somehow coincidentally, you know, having contain the same meaning as it does in the wake. There's a few examples of that. I think also the like sideways E that looks like an M means mountain in Japanese. You also see that on the signs, and in the wake, you know, that M figure or whatever it is HCE as the mountain.
The upside down bridge.
Yeah, I wonder a little bit how much like the typesetting limitations of the day constrain Joyce in how playful he could get with really pushing language even further. Because you would think that he would want to have used more of the Doodles family in the book, but probably that would have been difficult to get printed. That probably would have, so probably he would have eased back from including those. But I bet that he would have had a field day just making up his own, like never mind combining words together, combining symbols together to create new characters. I clearly he had that on his mind. I mean, that's how he's creating the system functions for his characters, as he's creating these symbols. But they don't really show up in the book, I don't think, right? Yeah, that's interesting. And then, all right, so I'll throw another question out there. Feel free to respond to any in the mix.
Before you do that,
oh, of course, yeah, please.
I'd like to jump in and somewhat disagree with a bit about what's been said so far. First of all, about Joyce going blind at that period, I think that's an exaggeration. There was a period where his eyesight began to fail, and then he underwent multiple surgeries, and recovering from surgeries, he was unable to see. But I think the greatest effect this had on Finnegans Wake is not necessarily making it a more auditory book, but rather delaying it extensively, because he was unable to work during that time, and where he was dependent on others. So I think Joyce's working methods were very visual, especially in the fact that he read a lot of books in order to recover information from it and collect information into it notebooks. Then he had to harvest these notebooks, which was again a visual. Now, he did find some creative ways of working around it. The most famous one are the copy notebooks, where he had someone, Madame Raphael, no relation, copied most of his notebook in her meticulous handwriting, and then he used her notes, which creates a lot of lovely things in Finnegans Wake, because like most everybody else, she couldn't read Joyce's handwriting. His handwriting is really one of the worst out there. So she would have to guess. And she created her own neologisms as she read. And then Joyce would read her notes, and sometimes he'd remember what he meant originally, and sometimes it didn't. And what she created ended up in Finnegans Wake many times, losing completely the original meaning that Joyce intended for it. Another issue I treat, and I know I'm perhaps different from others, but I consider Finnegans Wake to be written very much in English. The bulk of it is English. The grammar of it, the bulk of the grammar of it is English. Where the grammar doesn't look English. Many times it has to do with typos and there's hundreds, thousands probably of typos in Finnegans Wake, which distort the book. But obviously other languages impinge on the English considerably and intentionally. I speak several languages and can manage in a few additional ones. So it's definitely something that you pick as you read. Probably my third language would be French, and it's very easy. We need to remember that the Joyce household was primarily not an English household. They spoke Italian, they spoke French, they spoke English, they occasionally spoke German among themselves. So, and Joyce additionally learned Danish and Dutch and could manage in Latin and Greek. So definitely all of this now affected his writing. I think more important than regarding the auditory side, more important, and there's a lot of stress about the musicality of Finnegans Wake. We need to remember something that isn't stressed enough, I think, is that Joyce wasn't that interested in music. And I'll stress that, and I'll explain immediately. Was extremely interested in music, but only one kind. That's singing. He might have become a tenor, a successful tenor, were it not for a mishap, or he participated in the 1904. It's called the Fesh Soil, I think, or Fesh Coil. I don't remember how it's pronounced specifically. It's the Dublin Music Festival, and he competed as a tenor. And the story goes that he was sure, everybody was sure he was going to win, until one of the phases of the competition was to sing from sight. He was given a score sheet, and he had to sing an unknown song. And the story goes that he either could not do it or refused to do it. It's unclear whether he could read from sight or not. And he just didn't do that part, and he got the bronze medal instead of the gold. Now, we need to remember who won the year before. The year before, 1903, was won by John McCormack. For those of you who are not familiar with John McCormack, that's like the Taylor Swift of the 1920s and 1930s, the most famous singer in the world. Nothing even came close to John McCormack in the 1920s. He did hundreds of songs, and they were all bestsellers. Now, he became extremely famous and extremely wealthy. And Joyce basically saw McCormack as what he might have become were it not for the fact that he didn't win the gold medal. And it's definitely possible that he would have become a very famous and a very successful tenor, but he abandoned that because he didn't win the gold medal, and instead left Ireland and became a writer. So if you look into Finnegans Wake, there's a huge amount of songs in it, but not a lot of other forms of music. There's occasion when there's classical music, it's almost always opera, which Joyce was extremely fond of, but a lot less non-vocal music. I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And then that actually leads into my next question. So it's actually good news for me if Finnegans Wake is a very visual book, because my main interaction with Finnegans Wake is creating artwork based on it, illustrations. So I've been illustrating various aspects of Finnegans Wake for 20 years or so. Now, in the official world of Finnegans Wake, the only visual anchor anyone will give it is the Book of Kells. That seems to be it exclusively. They'll take a piece of it, slap it on a cover, call it good to go. There's like zero good Finnegans Wake book covers. The only good one I've ever seen is the one that's on Peter's website with the mountain and the river. That's the only good Finnegans Wake book cover I've ever seen. So other than the Book of Kells, are there any other legitimate visual touchstones that I could look to when trying to interpret this stuff? Like as a PS, is the Voynich manuscript something that was on Joyce's radar? Is he thinking about that at all in terms of creating this inscrutable artifact? Now, the Voynich manuscript does have a visual component to it that I could pull from. So if that was part of it, that would help. But I don't know how legit that is.
I want to jump in with two words as far as a visual component goes, and it might require travel. Phoenix Park.
Okay, yeah.
I think a walk through Phoenix Park and so much of the wake. Terrific example would be the Museum Room episode. So the Museum Room fable early on in chapter 1. If you walk to Wellington's monument, you can see that a lot of what Kate is describing are these 4 panels. So I agree. We're talking about a book that is appealing to our ears and our eyes, absolutely. So Phoenix Park is amazing that way. That would probably be, if I were to make a book cover, I would maybe take one of the friezes from Wellington's monument, if we could photograph that well. The magazine wall is also there. Even for that matter, the Mullingar pub is a terrific place to visit. I think a few hours in Phoenix Park and a very strong visual experiential component will
and the
your future reading.
The Liffey steps away from there as well too. From the Mullingar.
Okay, yeah.
The Liffey, the Mullingar, and Phoenix Park are within a stone's throw. In that section of Chapel Izzet, you got the Isolde's Cathedral there. Like, there's so many touchstones right there.
That's perfect. Thank you. Because there's only so much more I can take from the Book of Kells. I've pretty much stolen every page of it. So having a little bit more grist for the mill.
And the Book of Kells is amazing for chapter 5 specifically. But yeah, the Phoenix Park over and over again. So much of what is there. Even something as simple as the deer that still existed. I think that were introduced in the Norman invasion. I mean, we're talking about deer that have been there for millennia. They're still there, the park. So there are all kinds of references in the book that once you walk through the park, I think will speak to you even more. And honestly, I experienced it the other way around. I was reading the book, and it wasn't until I walked into Phoenix Park that whole element came to me. So to someone who's already been to the park, I can only imagine what their first read through of the book might be. Yeah, that would be my number 1 visual.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Oh shoot, I'm wrong speaker again.
My apologies. If you think about sorry, William Butler Yeats's dad was a painter. So if you come to it through Yeats, you get a certain particular thing. There's a wonderful essay that James Stevens wrote, and he wrote a lot about the Dublin, the National Gallery of Art in Dublin, and why he liked it better than the National Gallery in London. So it's like, as other people said, the actual physical experience of Dublin is overwhelmingly, especially in Ulysses, that visualness. And so Joyce, took in all of that. But if you can find that James Stevens essay, it's really interesting just to see that this was a world where people talked about opera, they talked about painting in a way that our internet world is very different from. You know, just the there's that one short story Counterpoint parts where even for a brutal alcoholic guy working as a scrivener, opera was the popular music of the world Joyce grew up in. And just that this is something that I think is so foreign to us 120 years later, 140 years later. But I think it's interesting for our compatriots in Ukraine or Italy or other parts of the world, that maybe is not as distant as it for us pagan Californians or other people in the United States.
Two more things that might be, it's not directly visualized clearly in Finnegans Wake, but I think the fact that Joyce used it visually affected the way that you wrote this. One is the Book of the Dead, and he obviously used an edition that was illustrated. So whereas he obviously mostly was interested in the text, I'm sure it had some effect on him. Another one is, and it ties with perhaps with Phoenix Park, but on a wider range, is maps. Joyce used maps extensively in Finnegans Wake. One, I think, good example is in book 4. I think it's, let me check, it's page 609, lines 16, 17, 18. It's a list of 12 words, 12 names, which after some research are clearly 12 communes in France. Communes, like a village, a small town, 12 communes in northwest France. But if you examine this on the map, you see that if you draw a line from Paris through each of these 12 communes and then extend the line would hit Ireland. It's basically 12 stopover points between Paris, which is where Joyce lived, obviously, throughout the composition of Finnegans Wake, and Ireland. And it's impossible to understand without a map, because otherwise it just seems like an arbitrary list and of place names, and there have been a lot of theories about these place names. But once you just put them on the map, you can see, and you can see that a lot more with things in Dublin. He either used the map or knew by himself the tram routes in Dublin, and the tram routes play a lot. Often explain why 2 or 3 things are combined together in a short passage. That's because they're all lying on the same tram route. So having acts, and I think it's as easy as, sometimes it's as easy as just using Google Maps. You don't necessarily need maps of the period, but I think that visual aspect of Finnegans Wake is often forgotten.
That is awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what both Adam and Rafi were saying, because I totally agree. I just posted something today, which I wrote for this event, which was like my stories and reflections of when I spent like 6 months traveling around Dublin. and mainly like looking at the sites that are relevant to the wake. And yeah, he was obsessed with the map of Dublin. Definitely Phoenix Park and Wellington Monument, the Magazine Wall, but all the neighborhoods around Phoenix Park, all of central Dublin. I found so the DART train in Dublin goes from Howth in the north all the way down to Bray in the south. And I found every single train stop in Finnegans Wake. And like he's constantly talking about the GPO, the General Post Office, as like the center point of the city, and then he'll refer to other places, as like a radius, a radial line connecting to that point. So it's like he sees Dublin as a circle. He calls it the oblong because it's like an oblong oval shape. And yeah, what's really been interesting to me lately is like the fact that Joyce was away from Dublin for like 30 years, but like absolutely obsessed with every little detail about it. And I've been interested in Finnegans Wake for a really long time, but I had been reading it and interested in it for like 10 years before I ever went to Ireland. And then when I went to Dublin and went around the neighborhoods and you start getting familiar with the names of places, and then you start reading the text again, I don't think there's anything that could illuminate the wake more than getting familiar with the place names of Dublin and some of the history of Dublin. Like if you only know that, if you know nothing about Joyce or Ulysses, whatever, but you know some of the districts and you know the Viking history and all this, you'll start to recognize something on every single page of the wake. One last thing, sorry. I just wanted to add, because I was looking at Linda's maps for this, and they were absolutely incredible and absolutely like capture my vision of what I see when I'm looking at the wake.
Thank you.
It's exactly what I would like to add. It's so nice that we aligned even with the messages, because yeah, we are really proud that of this killer feature of our reading group. It's Linda's mind maps, and I opened, just guys quickly would like to show in the context of our discussion 2 of them. I have a couple of favorites. Each of us has their favorite one, because it depends on the discussions. But it's like visualization from the other side. It's a rare visualization after we read Finnegans Wake. Linda makes amazing mind maps after each discussion, after each session, and they are on the website, on Bobby's website. But let me show you just a second. First of all, regarding the maps which we discussed right now. Give me a second. Sorry, guys, I'm not sure you see. I full to menu control.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep. So you see, it was one of the first, and it was like this connection with geography was an insight for me. And this house castle, like it's map of the Dublin, but as well it's like this giant here, and the visualization of the heroes of Finnegans Wake on the map was a real insight for me. And it's just like to show you the thing. And the second point is just give me a second. It's my favorite one from the point of view of senses, which I found here. Sorry, guys, it's something. Okay, and you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yep. So yep. It's one of the latest pages, latest parts, which it was actually the end of November. It's a month ago. Yep. And it was the part about the circles. And personally, I found so much from Crowley here. And but anyone can find in Finnegans Wake what he would like to find, and I found from my side. But it's it's a kind of meditation for us to speak, to discuss, then to see Linda's mind map, and then to to get back. You can use this mind maps and get back to them as much as you would like to do this, as many times as you would like, and it's a real meditation.
Alexander, sorry to interrupt. Where can we find these maps on a regular basis somewhere? Do they live somewhere online?
Yep. First of all, they are on the Bobby's website already.
Yes.
We will share links, and also we have our internal knowledge base on the Google Drive where Linda uploads all the mind maps. Yep, and
Great. Are you able to share it in the chat, and then Richard and I can make a note of it, because it would be amazing for us to look at these when we're rehearsing. I would love to reference these. These are terrific.
Bobby already shared in messages, yeah, but really we are really proud of Linda and mind maps.
Sasha, can you stop sharing the screen and scaring me, okay? So I just wanted to say that you just beat me. I wanted to ask a geographical question, okay, Raphael and other people as well, because you talked about these districts, and with tutor group, I also joined tutor group. We are now in the middle of ELP chapter. Obviously, lots of rivers. And I asked this question once during the session. So does it make any sense to check where they are on the globe? Because I tried doing that, but I got the answer that, Sasha, can you stop sharing the screen, please?
I'm sure that I'm not sharing. No, I'm sharing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I still sharing, guys, because sorry.
Sharing it. Okay, so I got an answer that the names of the rivers are there because of the names, obviously, because they somehow enter into sentences and intertwine into different language clusters and so on. But still, I have the urge to check the map and where the rivers are. Have you noticed any patterns there?
I tried that briefly. I can't say I did it methodically enough to reach a conclusion, but I wasn't able to find any patterns. It seems that he had a huge list before him. There's a theory that he had an atlas and just with an index of the river of the name. He didn't even find them on the map, but rather just looked in the index. But nobody found the specific version of the atlas that I'm familiar with. So at the moment, I'm under the assumption that it's random, but I may be proven wrong.
I'll try to find something.
Yeah.
At least to prove that you're right and it's random, because it makes sense, but still it won't stop me for pointing them on the globe for a while.
Yeah.
I'd like to respond to that. So not the location of the rivers necessarily, but as far as talking about like mapping and looking at locations of things on the globe, I just want to mention this incredible article. I'll post a link here. I wrote about this on my blog many years ago, but a scholar wrote an article about how if you were to take your copy of the Wake and like open it all the way so the covers connect, so like the last page and the first page connect, and then if you kind of envision that overhead view of the text and all the pages in a circle, the scholar argues that it's actually the globe. And that where you're connecting page 3 and page 628, there's all these references to I think it's the South Pole and polar explorers. And then if you go to the other end point, which would be the exact middle of the text, there's all these references to the North Pole. And then she tries to find all these things in other parts of the text that would situate you on the globe. Here, let me post that. It's really crazy out there stuff, but she makes a really good case for it. So yeah, it's interesting to think about.
wait, can I just clarify? So you mean that even the top of the page has northern stuff references and the bottom of the page has southern references?
It's
even
I don't know if it's on the top and bottom of the page, but it's there's a picture in there. I just sent a link. It's like,
Okay, yeah.
Here, let me share my screen real quick.
Yep.
Let's see. Hang on. Hold on. Technology. Here we go. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So here she shows this picture where if you're connecting page 628 and page 3, in that area, you can find references to like the North Pole and explorers that looked at the North, that went to the North Pole. And then if you go around the middle of the text, 315, 314, there's references to Antarctic explorers as well, and things in Antarctica. And then if you look at, these other parts, 157 or 471, I'm just saying this scholar made this point, and I've met her. She's a really brilliant and pretty serious scholar. She's saying like in the middle you'll find reference to the equator or Tropic of Capricorn, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's really out there and weird and creative, but she makes a pretty compelling case. I think it's really interesting to think about it.
Yeah, no, that kind of makes sense. Like I've been thinking a lot about like Joyce in his like practical situation of like probably, wanting to get this book done and like pushing this thing all the way through to 600 pages when most readers aren't going to be able to tell the difference between, if he cut it at 400, would most people know the difference? But clearly he's playing some kind of detailed game where he has to complete something. So he's doing something with all these pages, I think. I don't think he's just writing them he's not getting paid by the page. So I think that it makes sense that he would have to work around whatever he's building before he could call this thing done, because otherwise he would have called it early, I would assume, just because of the difficulty of making it.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing and then I'll be quiet for a minute. But this author, the same woman who wrote this article, her name is Kasia Bazarnik. She wrote a whole book about like Joyce's interest in the material presentation of the text. So like what words appear on what page and all that. Like it was not random. He was very focused on what the final text would look like and what paragraphs would be on what page and all that. So like the first edition of Ulysses has all these little Easter eggs where it's like page 88, there's like mention of a guy who's 88 years old and stuff like that. That it got lost in future editions. But with Finnegans Wake, most of the editions are the same, and he got to be really hands-on with the pagination and all that. Especially you see this in that chapter with the footnotes and all that. He's doing lots of things with the appearance of the text on the page in that chapter.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And it makes sense that he'd want that kind of control because it all matters in something like this. Every little detail counts and is open for interpretation. So I would imagine that he wouldn't want things to get misaligned. Real quick, I can throw another question out unless someone has something. Yep, go ahead, Oz.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on something Rafi said earlier about the Joyce's assistant reading from his copybook and translating his writing into what she understood it to be, and then coming up with neologisms of her own, inadvertently, and meanings of her own that Joyce didn't intend, and Joyce being delighted with that. Because I think that's part of what Finnegans Wake offers. And I think Joyce would have delighted in people getting things out of the book that he had not intentionally put in there, that people just got on their own. And so I don't know that if you discover something in Finnegans Wake, whether it's that necessary that Joyce intended that or not, if it actually works for you. And so Rafi also mentioned the Book of the Dead. That's, speaks to my bias because I see a lot of the technology of Books of the Dead in Finnegans Wake. I noticed when Alexander showed his maps just now on the first one, the words "Don't Panic" were written pretty large in one area, and Don't Panic also is on the front cover of a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a science fiction book of the dead. And the purpose of Books of the Dead is to sort of map out and guide consciousness into higher states of consciousness, higher territories that are beyond our normal everyday consciousness. And back to the idea of it, or the question, was it written in English? I think that the foundation of Finnegans Wake very much is in English, but that he tried to break through English to encompass all the languages in the world. He's trying to do, like, this was part of, I think, what Robert Anton Wilson was getting at in his Tales of the Tribe class. They were trying to, and Ezra Pound also, by introducing all these other languages, they're trying to sort of meld together the human experience to take it beyond our cultural biases that are produced by our mother language, and just sort of expand that out. And I am monolingual myself, but I know how to use reference works. And so all these, looking up stuff in different languages just really expands your own mind. And not only that, but he's referring to other lexicons. It's pretty, many people have noticed that the sort of Hebrew mystical system of Kabbalah is in Finnegans Wake. And that's, again, you're using language, English or Hebrew, to get beyond language, to get into creating images that go beyond language. So I think English was a jumping off point, but it was meant to sort of break through and to, move the sort of collective consciousness of humanity forward.
Can I jump in, guys? Also, thank you for your comment, because it was we discussed it a lot in group and generally. I will start from example. I reread recently, unfortunately in translation, Umberto Eco. I forgot the name in English.
Pendulum, Foucault's Pendulum.
Foucault's Pendulum. Yeah, and the quotation for one of the chapters was the quotation from Abulafia or Abulafia. I'm not sure how you correctly pronounce this surname. It's like medieval Kabbalist. And it was so nice. It was so nice quotation in the context of Finnegans Wake. Like he said that when you are going to communicate with God. So sorry for my translation in English. I'm just trying to make the quote in the context of Finnegans Wake. You need you take the letters, not words, but letters. You swift, maybe swift, like you swift them very quickly until the letters are warm, and this warmth make your heart warmer, and then you are ready to get the God inside. And for me it's so like the same what we are doing when we read in Finnegans Wake. Sorry, maybe it's like metaphor, but it's very nice to see these comparisons in other authors and in other writings. And yep, Lawrence, I see that if for sure you have a lot to add here.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to add something. Also to clarify my position, that I said that what I meant is that it's more interesting, in my opinion, to regard Finnegans Wake as written in a variation of English and not in regular English. Because of course, yes, the bulk of it is English, and of course, it's also very important to understand that most of the time, English grammar still holds, and so that we have to look for maybe misprints or something to see that sometimes things are, let's say, easier than they may appear at first look. At the same time, though, it would be too much, I think, to say it's just plain regular English, not just because of the number of neologisms, but also because you're asked systematically from the test to engage with it on this Kabbalistic level, where individual letters can bring with them the meaning of a whole word, since they are mostly portmanteau. And so when you start really engaging with the portmanteau and the idea that a word can, a written word can relate to multiple words you know of, and that sometimes sentences have double meanings, but not like in the usual layered interpretation, or let's say a literal meaning and then a metaphorical meaning. No, something different. They have like two different literal meanings in two different languages at the same time that are relating to each other. Well, this goes beyond regular grammar, and I think that it's interesting to look at it and to give it a name, to problematize it, let's say. So I think it's more problematic to say it's not written in regular English, and that's why I think it's more interesting. And I wanted to add something. I hope I managed to explain myself, something regarding meaning. And there's this big dichotomy since the beginning. We talked about the fact that Finnegans Wake, it's enjoyable just for the sound of it, also because Joyce said so. But at the same time, we've been dealing with the idea of reading and multiple readings from different people that give different interpretations, but also different readings by the same person, and how one gets more. So I would like also to say that it's true, in my opinion, that the meaning is infinite. There can be infinite interpretations. But I think that there are theories that guide you in your reading, lines of interpretations that are more fruitful than others. And what I mean by this relates back to the visual versus auditive dualism, because I think that the text appears to be more dark and just auditive when one has little or no theory, and that's a way of engaging with it. But apart from saying that one can enjoy it just by reading it aloud, Joyce also said that people would have to work on it for 300 years before understanding it. So we should, I think, balance these two quotes here, and see that one embraces a theory, and the theory is fruitful, let's say, in reading. The page becomes more visual, and I would say that the more the theory one is using while reading is fruitful, the more the auditive goes into the background and the visual aspects come to the forefront. And one last thing, I think that it's true that sometimes this giving room to the idea that theories are important, and that there is a hierarchy maybe of theories, can be dangerous. And Finnegans Wake also always brings the problems dealing with authority to the forefront, because every time there's a reading, there's some people who know more about it than others, and so it immediately becomes a political, active, dynamical political thing. But notwithstanding that, I think that there are also traps inside the text, meaning there are levels of meaning that Joyce put there that can satisfy the reader who's not curious enough, and then really adopting those meanings as absolute, it becomes like a firewall that keeps you out of the goods that are inside the text. And I will give you just one example. For example, the thunder words. The thunder words, most of the times they are made of words that mean all the same thing, one next to the other. Not all thunder words, but there's a kind of apparent, very clear rule. And if one leaves it to that, it's not very interesting. I mean, what does it I mean, yeah, I have 17 different languages saying to fall or something like that. But why the thunder word? Why doing that? Then if you go deeper, you separate differently the parts of the thunder words, you discover many other words that link to one another, giving you a much richer interpretation. But the first level of the words all meaning the same thing was, of course, not casually put there by Joyce. That's there as a firewall, because if you are satisfied with one level of meaning, that you stop there and you do not go further. So I think that meaning is important. Not everything is relative in Finnegans Wake. There are hierarchies, but there are also traps for the to notionistic reader, I would say.
That is awesome. I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Yes, I just wanted to say that Lorenzo has fantastic theories that he has been sharing with our group. And after that, we were just looking with big eyes at Cosmos above us, trying to go beyond firewalls, or not very successfully always. But yeah, I totally support this idea. And I hope that Lorenzo will actually publish his theories so that everybody will be able to apply them or disagree with them. Doesn't matter, but they have to be out there. Please do it.
Thank you. Will do. Sometimes.
Yeah, so this leads into my final question, which is what is Joyce doing with this? What did he hope to accomplish with this book? And I know there's kind of the different mythologies that are built around his intentions, and there's a lot of different ways we can go with it. But so one thing I would wonder, so according to the world, Ulysses is the important book. That's the one that matters. That's the one we care about, right? I don't think that's true from Joyce's point of view. I think that Finnegans Wake is the book. I think everything else was prelude to being able to create this book. And when I was having the discussion with the Ukrainian group, it occurred to me that what he was probably doing was trying to create a sacred text, not fooling around, not a parody of a book, actually try to create a new sacred text. Now, whatever a sacred text actually means specifically, I'm sure it can vary, but I think he was actually trying to do something that was beyond the normal scope of just literary tools. I think he's employing a lot of other kinds of games in this. So I think, that's why you write a book this way. That's why you push to get to, it to be perfect and not just publish it when it is convenient and you want to be done. It has to be the way it has to be. And so that's what I think he was doing. Anyone else have a point of view of what his intentions are with creating a book like this?
I'll just mention, kind of as a follow-up to the previous discussion about language, and also to answer this question, or to try to answer this question, because there's endless answers to this. But I think one of the things he's doing with language is showing how words are not static and existing in a vacuum. Words are the surface part of a network which has all these deep etymological roots that connect it with so many other words, so many other languages, such that when you look at words the way Joyce plays with them in the Wake, you're also learning about history. As far as the English language, I think I read this in Joyce's Book of the Dark by John Bishop, how the English language has other languages in it from countries that England conquered and had as a colony, and then these words just got embedded in English. So it's the history of the English Empire is embedded in the language, that kind of thing. There's also connections by false etymologies, like words that have no connection, but they sound the same. So it's making all these new connections. So I think what Joyce is doing is just, he's making you think about the structure of your thoughts and the structure of your speech, and how there's so much history to it, and there's so much more layers to everything. And the same goes for the place. Like we were talking about Dublin. He describes Dublin in a way that everything that's ever happened in Dublin is there at one time. It's not in the past. It's all alive, living there. I was using this word in the piece I wrote about the wake in Dublin called timefulness. It's not timelessness, it's timefulness. It's a space that is so filled with time that it contains all these things. It's like this really dense space where there's so many layers you could dig down to and see the past and the roots of things.
An interesting comparison, I think, Moby Dick has already been mentioned, and Moby Dick kind of reinvented literature and sort of created hypertext in some ways, where you have text and then we have a digression into like whale biology, and then we come back to the story. And so that's kind of the internet, where you're open another tab and you go look something up and come back to, hopefully, to the thing you're reading, or as some of you have shared your screens, you have too many tabs open. But the wake seems like a different mental model, where it's more like Joyce is spending his life ingesting all of this data and training his internal model. And then he creates this palace where there's clusters of meaning and clusters of things put together in a way that we can't really fathom. And then he starts generating this text after like training himself on all these languages, all of the world literature, all of the history, and it just starts spouting out. And it's just like a different model. It's going from, the internet structure to like more of an AI structure, where you have these spurious connections that, Peter, you're describing that arise, and it's a lot of fun to observe and try to puzzle out.
If I may, from my point of view, first of all, regarding quote unquote the important book, I think we have more or less objective proof when Nora was interviewed after Joyce's death, I think in the 40s or 50s. She's been quoted to say something like, "Why is everybody talking about Ulysses? Finnegans Wake, that's the important book." So, and the assumption is she's basically quoting Joyce in that respect, who's not there to defend himself anymore. As to why he wrote it and why he wrote it in this way, might be perhaps my novelist bias, but I think he wrote it because he wanted to and he could. I don't think there's many people out there who could do it at this level, and he was basically pushing himself to create something that hasn't been created before. In that respect, Ulysses is also something to a much smaller degree, and I think he basically was enjoying himself playing with the English language in a way that perhaps has been played before, but never at this scale. Basically, the way Finnegans Wake works is not that different than poetry, but the level of complexity of a single sentence in Finnegans Wake, or a couple of lines, often dwarfs many other poems, even if it uses similar techniques. So I just think it's like his Everest. It was there. He had to climb it, and nobody else could.
I want to call attention real quick to an interview I did with a scholar, Michael Johnson. So he's incredible. So I do this bit with him where I interview him. So I find the smartest guy I know, and I ask him the hardest questions I can think of, and that's the bit in the interview. And so one of the questions I asked him was, what are the implications of Finnegans Wake's holographic prose within the fields of general semantics and the linguistic relativity? So, which would be, the theory behind that is how we perceive the world depends on the language that we use. Joyce creates this new language that works in different ways than existing languages, and therefore creates a new type of cognitive domain. And his response is I just, if you ever have time, take a look at his response to that, because it kind of takes this conversation in a lot of different places. So I just want to throw out there that Michael Johnson, who is not with us today, has a lot of very, very interesting things to say about all this, and I just wanted to shout them out real quick.
I think it's interesting if you think about origins, that Tolstoy said he wrote War and Peace because he wanted to explore the origins of the Decembrist movement, and that sort of gets lost in the text. And Robert Anton Wilson, near the end of his life, started calling himself the last Decembrist. So, Bobby, this is just a pitch for next December. It will be the 200th anniversary of the Decembrist uprising. In terms of McLuhan and media, I find it interesting that even the 6-hour-long Russian film of War and Peace omitted all the Freemasonic material, all the stuff leading up to the Decembrists, and just how we have, and it's so wonderful that here we are in this global village to hear talking about Joyce today in a world which in some little way does not care about books much at all. I just wanted to bear that as you will, but our friends who can read Russian and Ukrainian, what the heck the connection is between Robert Anton Wilson, because I do not know what the heck Bob Wilson, what he was talking about at the end of his life about the Decembrists and the Illuminati. And I've been pondering that since Bob died.
Yeah, so I remember him talking about that, and then you've been talking about it for 20 years. I've had this phrase, "the last Decemberist," thrown at me. I still don't know what it means, so I guess I'll finally have to dig in and see what it actually means. So I guess we can start heading towards a landing. Oz, you got something for us?
Sure. Yes, I'm on. Okay. I just wanted to say what Peter was saying a few minutes ago about Dublin and the timefulness of it was a perfect description of what I call the Bardo, or what's known as the Bardo, the territory of the land of the dead, the territory that's after we die, or either egotistically or biologically, we enter this weird space. And then why did Joyce write Finnegans Wake? I think there's probably many reasons. And Rafa, what he said, I think I totally agree with it. I also totally agree with it that, as probably everyone here does, that Finnegans Wake was the book. I even think there's an anecdote in Elliman's biography of Joyce where Joyce kind of, said that Ulysses was kind of yesterday or whatever for him. Anyway, why did Joyce write the book? Robert Anton Wilson pointed out to me in the Tales of the Tribe class that Joyce was getting closer and closer to his death as he was working on Finnegans Wake, and he knew that. And so this is just a wild theory, but I think one reason he wrote it was to write himself into eternity, to write himself make a place of consciousness that was outside his biological form, which he knew was going to pass imminently. Socrates said was alleged to have said on the day that he died, is that all philosophy is working toward preparation for death, because philosophy is intending to have a separation of the soul from the body. I was reminded also that William Burroughs had a tragic accident early in his life where he accidentally killed his wife. And then he said subsequently that made him seriously become a writer, that he had to write his way out of that tragedy of having done that. And that's what he did. And so I don't know, I think Joyce was trying to write himself into eternity.
And we are reading ourselves into eternity with Joyce.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We just got to the end of our first pass through chapter 7. And it ends with, he lifts the life wand and the dumb speak. So he's not only himself, but everybody else has ever been around. We're all in there.
All right, so I figure what we'll do is we've about gone around for a couple of hours and have just barely scratched the surface of the topic. I'll throw out my final thought, and then anyone that wants to jump in with a final thought, toss it in, and then we'll continue with our maybe night. I encourage everyone to check out the website. There's a lot of really good material on there. A lot of people took a lot of time to create some wonderful things. So thanks to everybody that sent stuff in, and thanks for everybody that showed up for this. This is amazing. So my final thought is I'd like to propose a maybe night tradition. And so the tradition is that tomorrow morning, when you wake up, you're going to write down everything you can remember from your dream last night. And then you're going to take whatever it is that you remember, whatever you're able to bring back from slumberland into the waking world, and you're going to create a little artwork out of it, whether it's a poem, a haiku, a sketch, a song. And then once you create it, do whatever you want with it. Throw it out, publish it, share it, burn it, whatever you want to do. Once you pull it out of dreamland, do with it whatever you want. But I think that would be an interesting thing. And I got it from Alan Moore. I'm reading his Moon and Serpent bumper book of magic right now, and that's one of the exercises he proposed. And I've been having a blast with it, and it really does work. Like if you just do it one day, you might not get that much out of it. But I've been doing it for a couple of weeks now, and just like it went from just like I saw a weird cat in a parking lot, and now I'm getting these like whole big production things. So yeah, just something to try. Maybe night tradition tomorrow. Write down whatever you remember from your dreams. And I turn it over to whoever would like to give their final thoughts.
Just one thing that I wanted to do full circle to something you said at the beginning. You mentioned that it's a dream, and there's been talk about somebody the dreamer perhaps wakes during the dream, and you said you weren't sure where that is within the novel. You should probably reread chapter 3-4, the penultimate chapter. It's very clear that someone wakes up there. Nominally, it's Jerry, the Shem-like twin, but of course it can be someone dreaming about someone waking up. But if you don't go that way, and that's been suggested, then we do see Jerry crying in his dream. Father and mother wake up, go up to him, pacify, return to bed, make love, etc. Whether you read that on as part of the dream or as reality impinging on the dream is, of course, up to you.
We're recording 3-4 on Monday for our podcast, and I'm going to take everything you just said, and I'm going to sound very smart on my podcast. I will absolutely credit you with that, but wonderful insight. Thank you.
I think that's where Joseph Campbell pulls the interpretation that it's the winter solstice too. I think that's the same scene, if I'm not mistaken. So I wonder, if I sent you the thing, could you take a look at it to see if you see anything?
Sure. What
here
to add to that? There's an additional theory about the date. I'm not great about specific date theory, but if you read the beginning of 4:1, it's clearly that the beginning of 4:1 happens on a Sunday morning.
Yeah,
which
yeah,
means
so it's,
that everything before that happens on Saturday night. It makes the most sense that based on primarily on 4:1, but other things too, that the best day to work for that is spring equinox that happens to fall on a Holy Saturday. Holy Saturday, that's the Saturday before Easter Sunday, where basically Jesus revived.
Right,
so, so if we're taking the assumption that it's a spring equinox where nature revives and Easter Sunday where Jesus revived and combine them, there are specific dates where both coincide. Fortunately, the last one was in 1818 and the next one is in 20 something. So it's not something that happens that often, a few hundred years, but that's one more theory about the date, basically Easter Sunday.
I will say, so both you and Joseph Campbell or Henry Morton Robinson. So it's book 3, chapter 4 is where they say that they wake up from the dream. So that is
yes. So I agree with that.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
But there are other people that like Clive Hart who says no, that's where the dream is the deepest because now they're dreaming about someone dreaming and waking up from his dream. So
yeah, I guess I was hesitant to go with them waking up because the language didn't go back to normal. That's where I was thinking that it's but it could just be he's groggy. It could be like, or I don't know. There's a million different ways you can go with it, but yeah,
I think where it's the most realistic, the language is Esperanto.
Yeah.
There's a few sentences in Esperanto in 3-4 that seems to be the most realistic, where everybody's awake for a second. Why Esperanto? I have no idea.
Well, that was the proposed universal language, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that? Okay, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I would like to point out the obvious problem with the idea that they are waking up there, which is that if they wake up and then go back to sleep, then they would eventually really wake up and go with the day. But the book is circular. So it's like the waking part is an island inside a structure that is self-sustaining, which is the dream. And so maybe topology is something that was important too. It's not really maybe a visual, because topology is something different from that, but one can draw visual inspiration from topology too, I guess, for Finnegans Wake, because it is a thing in the book. And like non-orientable surfaces and this relationship between the waking life and the dream, I think it's not simple if we take it just to be I think just a dream and not a theory about dreams and reality, it's not enough, because I think the book is like that because it wants to tell us something about thought, language, wake, sleep, and that sort of things. And topology might be important. Jacques Lacan, the famous psychoanalyst, wrote some interesting things about Finnegans Wake in his late years, and they also relate to this big aspect of the book.
I was about to say you spoiled it for the Ukrainian group who are on page 60. You said he wakes up, but now it's back to normal, right? So it's complicated. We're fine.
Yeah. The question, of course, is who is E? And he wakes up, but yeah.
Just to throw something out, you know, a lot of mystics consider our normal waking reality to be a dream. So it's maybe whoever wakes up from a regular dream into the dream that is life. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, and I would also just agree with what Bobby said before, that he was intentionally trying to create a sacred text.
So just
All right.
as so just as far as like final thoughts go, for me, this has been a really interesting conversation. I would say that at points I've been reminded of, there's a podcast I really love called Dissect, where they sort of do deep dives into music, and it's interesting because, of course, I guess in modern times you've got musicians who, of course, are doing quite a bit of media and stuff like that. So you get to see some of these very complex theories and theories that seem to have a lot of support put to musicians, and it's always interesting to me to see where they don't connect with things. So there was a lot of discussion around Radiohead's In Rainbows, this sort of like neat cutting of two of the whole text of the whole album, and how at the exact middle point there's kind of this musical change, and sort of bringing that to the band, and they sort of laughed and said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. You know, we didn't notice that." So I think it's, but at the same point, I don't think the fact that something has perhaps not been done intentionally makes it not worth looking at or interrogating, especially in the sense that, you know, where I guess somebody like Joyce is interesting to a lot of theorists for what they've called like his surplus of meaning. So the way that it's developed in a way that can contain this larger utility or this larger set of interpretive possibilities. So that's sort of my one thought there is I'm sort of interested in the way that not necessarily whether or not Joyce actually intended such and such, but just the way that these things are present in the text, I guess, regardless of the intent of the author. And that's probably something that, you know, that I was interested in before this conversation, and that, you know, kind of stays with me at the end of it.
All right. Everybody. Oh yeah, go ahead, Alexander.
I have just a quick. It's more. It's more like a general note, but I'm so happy that we met each other on the meeting, and it's so nice to proceed with some community stuff, even if it would be just one day in the year, or one night, maybe night. In the year, but really appreciate, guys, that all of you was so open for the invite, and it's a great pleasure to share this time with you.
Thank you for inviting.
And you're all very welcome to join us at our Ukrainian group at our discussions, guys. We would love to have you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure meeting you all. My take on the book is that it brings people together. That's whether that's sacred or not, whether something communal is. And that's how sacred texts were once shared. There weren't a lot of people who could read them. You needed to gather around the people who could. You needed to listen to them. They needed to. So it feels like in the Jewish tradition, it's a cheder where everyone gets together and they kind of do it out loud and that kind of thing. So I feel like there's a lot of humming that's happening here, a communal hum, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you all for including us, and it's been a real pleasure. Enjoy the shortest day / longest night of the year.
Yeah, and thank you for I'm really looking forward to seeing what everyone has created and just following along. And what's great about Finnegans Wake is it doesn't need to be successful. It doesn't need to catch on any more than it already happened. It already exists. It doesn't need to do anything more than it's already doing, which is kind of a little bit of a relief. I don't know, a lot of times when you do creative endeavors, it's well, is anyone going to care? Is anyone going to blah, blah, blah? But it doesn't matter. We're already here. It already is doing what it needs to do. It doesn't need to do any more than what it's already done. And now we can enjoy it. And I think that's great. And that's what this was all about. And I was absolutely delighted to meet all of you and see all of you. And we will absolutely be back next year. If any, the invite will go out. If you're around and interested, please come back and let's continue the conversation. And anything that you create, let me know, and I will signal boost to the best of my ability. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing more of everyone. So again, thank you so much. And did I cut anybody off? Does anybody need a final thought? All right, I think we're good. All right, thank you so much, and I will see you around.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Bob.